With the 2024 NBA season at its end, we're rapidly entering one of my favorite portions of the year, draft season. Like any kid who grew up infatuated with the game of basketball, I always imagined myself walking across the stage, being drafted to my home team Knicks, and shaking the commissioner's hand. And like most any other kid who had that dream, it didn't work out at all, and now I owe the government over $40,000 in student loans.
Oh no!
But even though my dream didn't work, draft season is still a great time because you get to feel the magic in the air. The draftees wearing progressively stranger suits, the tears of joy from parents watching their kids achieve their dreams, and the tears of pain from watching your team draft some random who inevitably won't work out. It's all a magical time in the league, and it's a really good feeling to be able to watch people achieve their dream even if it didn't work out for you, because you still get to experience a bit of that feeling by proxy. At least, that's what draft season has typically been. Unfortunately, this year's draft class has fallen victim to post-Wemby syndrome, where, because we aren't seeing a 7'4" franchise-altering demigod, people are writing off the entire class for being weak, uninteresting, and relatively unaffected. And I think that's pretty lame for the reasons I've outlined above. But just as every cloud has its silver linings, within the boredom of this class, I found that there's opportunity. To me, since the class is being lauded as weak, and the supposed biggest prize in the draft is being compared to Jaren Jackson Jr., it means that the possible penalties for missing in this draft are far lower than they'd typically be. And that means we can get a bit more, say, risky with our picks. So with all that being said, I present to you my 5 most interesting and risky prospects in the 2024 NBA Draft. Player 1, Jamal Shead. Houston has consistently been one of the better teams in college basketball over the past 4 years, and for at least the last 3, a major reason for their sustained excellence has been Jamal Shead. Standing at 6'1" with a 6'3" wingspan and a 37.5-inch vert, I will admit, athletically on paper, Shead is not impressive, especially by today's freakish standards. However, while Shead's physical tools may cause you to overlook him as a prospect, what he was able to do during his 4 years at Houston, especially in his final season, makes him a prospect that I personally am pretty high on. At 6'1", he won the Defensive Player of the Year award, Big 12 Player of the Year, unanimous First Team All-American, and a whole bunch of other accolades that all stand as a testament to his skills as a defender and his prowess as a point guard. But none of these awards are what makes Shead one of my favorite prospects. Because if you're in the draft, obviously you can play and you have potential. Shead's most impressive achievement to me was the 2023-24 Nolan Richardson Award, which is given to the Division I player who's the heart and soul of their team and a leader on and off the court. And this is perhaps the best aspect of Shead's game and an underrated aspect of the drafting and scouting process. Shead is my pick for the best leader in the draft, and if you watched any Houston basketball this year, then you know they're a team that played with extreme passion and effort on the defensive end, and that translated to the offensive side of the ball. And Shead was the head of the dragon defensively, supercharging his guys to be hyper-aggressive on traps and bringing excitement and passion back to that side of the ball. Look no further than the Cougars' loss to Duke in the tournament for evidence of Shead's importance as a leader, where, after spraining his ankle and being ruled out for the game, Houston utterly collapsed and lost to a 4-seeded Duke squad that they honestly should have steamrolled. And just as we've seen passion and leadership from Shead on the court, we've seen it off the court as well. And there's a viral video of Shead picking up garbage on Bama's home floor after a loss in 2021 caused his teammates to push over the bin in frustration. Shead is a class act who has the passion and maturity that seems to be lacking from so many young players today. He averaged 12.9 points and 6.3 assists on 40.9% from the field and 30.9% from 3. So the elephant in the room is his shooting. However, to me, after watching his game and witnessing the resurgence of defense this past year in the playoffs, in my mind, Shead draws comparisons to TJ McConnell. McConnell has always been beloved by his teammates, and despite his lack of a jumper, he's been able to make up for this with his tenacious defense and his signature ability to get to the paint and hit mid-range jumpers, both qualities that he and Shead share. So for whichever team is lucky enough to draft Shead, just know you're getting a winner, a leader, and a guy who can supercharge a defense and inspire passion from his teammates. I see Shead as a draft pick who's being overlooked purely on the basis of a perceived lack of physical tools and a general distaste for four-year players that's pervaded the league and caused teams to ignore talent that's right in front of them. This brings us to player 2, Baylor Scheierman. I first got to see Baylor Scheierman about 2 years ago in the NCAA first round, when the South Dakota Jackrabbits played against Providence. And my first thought was, man, they really named their team the Jackrabbits. What a stupid name. But the second thing I thought was that Scheierman was an absolute killer, and I wondered what he would look like at a bigger school against better comp. And while the Jackrabbits would fall to Providence, Scheierman would really showcase his full skill set. And as a 6'6" lefty two-guard with playmaking skills and an absolute flamethrower, it was no question that he wouldn't be with South Dakota after this year. So it was no surprise when he transferred to Creighton in 2022-23, and I would finally have my wish granted to see him compete with a major program at a higher level. And Scheierman absolutely overachieved, and somehow managed to make his way into the record books at Creighton in just 2 short years. See, while I listed Scheierman's offensive skills, a revelation to me was just how good he was at rebounding the basketball. In his first season with Creighton, he pulled down the most rebounds since 1985, with 306 total boards and 271 defensive boards alone. And he built on this season in a major way in his second year, jumping from 12.8 points to 18.5 and averaging 9 rebounds on 44% shooting from the field and 38% shooting from 3. During his college career, he became the first D1 player with at least 2,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, 500 assists, and 300 3-pointers, which just further speaks to how well-rounded he is as an offensive player. Scheierman was a baller at Creighton, and he proved to be a crucial addition to the Blue Jays' 2 tournament runs, and he was really able to display his entire skill set and ability to impact the game in a multitude of ways. Unfortunately, he's being overlooked for 2 reasons, one of which you'll find is a consistent theme in this draft. The first and most logical reason is that as an athlete and defender, Scheierman is limited. He's pretty slow for 6'6", and he definitely can and will be exploited on defense at the NBA level. There's no getting around that fact. But I do think if you put him around solid wing defenders or utilize him sparingly, similar to the way guys like Sam Hauser or AJ Green have been on the Celtics and Bucks, this is less of a concern. The second and more unfortunate reason for the lack of coverage is that Scheierman was a 5th-year senior, and at 23, he's one of the older prospects in the draft. Due to his age, Scheierman, like most other prospects in the draft, is being labeled as a guy with limited potential, and a lot of draft boards have him in that 35 to 45 range, though I have seen him placed as early as the mid-20s. Regardless of where he's drafted, just know that Scheierman is a really solid pick who's being overlooked for his age, but whichever team adds this 6'6" versatile scorer is getting a great player. For our next guy, we have someone who's been getting a lot of press in recent days due to developments in the draft, but I still think his situation speaks to a larger issue in the NBA. Player 3. Donovan Clingan. UConn was the most dominant team in college basketball this year, and the reason for that was the attention to detail and culture of winning that was established by Coach Dan Hurley. And while teams won't be able to get Hurley in the draft, the next best thing is getting a young player who was brought up in that winning culture with that attention to detail. Donovan Clingan is a 20-year-old 7'2" center who spent his first 2 years at UConn in this winning culture, and with a clear role that he was able to perfectly fill in his second year. He's a pure rim protector who was able to use his size and 7'7" wingspan to act as an anchor for the number 9 defense in all of college basketball. Clingan has drawn comparisons to centers like Ivica Zubac, Derek Lively, and Walker Kessler, who are all traditional centers that have managed to carve out a consistent role within the league as screen setters and guys who do one thing and do it extremely well. Based off these past playoffs, and really this entire season, I think it's been proven that there is still a place in the league for guys like Clingan, especially if you look at the success that the Timberwolves were able to have pre-Luka Doncic. Furthermore, with Clingan being brought up in that UConn system under Hurley and exhibiting the passion and fire for the game, as well as being around winners who demand excellence from him, I think he'll be a guy who's certainly ahead of the curve in terms of defensive intangibles and help rotations. If you were to put Clingan with a guard who's able to hit him in his spots, much like we've seen with guys like Clint Capella or Derek Lively, he'll likely be able to replicate his around the rim efficiency, considering the fact he shot 65% from the field with the majority of his shots coming around the cup. And once again, you can't teach 7'2". So just as he was a legitimate lob threat at UConn, he could be good for a team like the Atlanta Hawks or Charlotte Hornets, who both have talented guards in LaMelo and Trae Young that can maximize his talents. And on the other end, Clingan could help to plug up the middle and make up for the defensive shortcomings of those two PGs, which makes him a logical pick for both squads. The skepticism surrounding Clingan and really the entirety of this draft is just a symptom of the larger issue of the quote-unquote unicornification of the NBA. This is where every 7-footer is expected to be Kevin Durant or Victor Wembanyama, and when these insane expectations aren't met, the kid is labeled a bust almost immediately. And people tend to forget that for every Kevin Durant or Kristaps Porzingis, there are 10 Dragan Benders and Thon Makers. Especially if people don't ask him to play outside his role, Clingan seems to me to be the most what you see is what you get prospect in the draft. And I don't think that a bet this sure is a bad thing. For our next player, and probably my favorite player on the list, we have Rob Dillingham. If you've been around me or watched this channel with any sort of regularity, then you know that I am a sucker for bag talk hoopers. The guys who aren't super duper efficient but have a handle, jumper, and just make the game look fun, and hoop with that swag that you only get from playing a lot. Rob checks literally all of those boxes, and if you're familiar with the social media basketball circuit, then you know his nickname is Rob with the Shifts, and I couldn't think of a more accurate title. While he spent most of the season coming off the bench for Kentucky, it was clear that at certain points, Dillingham looked like he could be the best player on the team. He's an explosive scorer who can handle the ball and create off the dribble for himself, and has shown the ability to be able to create for others based off his quickness and handle. And while I've gushed over the swagger and freedom that Dillingham has played with, I also think that he's a prospect who has the potential to improve on a lot of his weaknesses and shortcomings. This is because prior to his season at Kentucky, Dillingham was playing in the Overtime Elite League, where he was a super inefficient shot chucker who had a tendency to over-dribble and force up difficult shots. Dillingham's transformation from OTE to Kentucky is night and day, and I think it speaks to the type of team environment that he'd thrive in if drafted. As I see it, the reason Rob was so inefficient and terrible at OTE is because the league, while competitive, ultimately wasn't a super serious basketball-focused atmosphere, and a lot of the social media antics made it a place where Rob didn't seem to be challenged or focused enough to care about efficiency. So when he arrived at Kentucky under Coach Cal, who prides himself on crafting NBA-ready guards, it makes sense that he would improve. But the level of improvement really speaks to his ability to zero in and commit to excellence when he's put in the right environment. That's all a long-winded way of saying please keep Rob away from a team like the Wizards or Hornets, because as much fun as it would be to see him go out there and hoop like he's at the Rucker or Dykeman, all it would do is put him in an unserious environment where he'd be labeled as a shot chucker. And for my final player, Bronny James. I don't really know where to start when speaking about Bronny. And from hearing all the discourse surrounding him in the past few months, it's clear that I'm not alone in saying that. There's so much to talk about with Bronny, so I guess I'll start with the elephant in the room. His father being LeBron. LeBron has been very vocal about his intentions of playing with his son for years now, and this has definitely been a factor in his draft process. There have been rumblings about teams drafting Bronny to get LeBron, and as of the writing of this video, teams like the Mavs and obviously the Lakers have expressed interest in drafting him. With Bronny coming into the league as LeBron's son, though it's obviously a pressure he's been dealing with his whole life, we've seen how fathers can unintentionally put a target on their son's back with pre-draft antics. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of the lower rated prospects who aren't getting as much coverage as Bronny is because of his father, as well as some of the league vets who aren't fans of the perceived nepotism, set out to gun for Bronny on the court. However, with him being LeBron's son, I can also say that Bronny knows how to play basketball the right way. And for as much as the conversation is centered around his father, Bronny has real game. He can shoot the ball, has great passing vision and makes the right pass, and he's a great cutter who can also defend. Bronny is the epitome of a great role player, and I think it's funny that LeBron has spent so many years searching for the perfect teammate, he decided to just make his own. Jokes aside, Bronny is a really smart player, and part of the reason his freshman season at USC was so lackluster was because he was too unselfish at times, and willing to make the right pass rather than taking over for himself. And I think that's a great problem to have for a prospect who by all accounts will likely be playing with LeBron James, and won't really be a first option or ball dominant player in the league. To me, Bronny is a legit prospect who has the potential to develop into a really great role player, and the type of piece that will be a great fit in a team-based system where he could play off of more ball-dominant superstars, like Boston. And with the Bronny report done, we've reached the end of the video. While I won't disagree that this year's draft is lacking in the superstar name brand generational talent that we've seen in more recent years, to say that the draft is outright lacking in talent is a lie, and the overall lack of coverage of these prospects speaks to how we as NBA fans have become spoiled by the likes of unicorns and jumbo-sized super point guards. Even though the game has evolved considerably and we are moving towards a future of 7-foot 3-point shooting PGs, this transformation won't happen overnight. And I think it's unfortunate that some really great players are being ignored just because they aren't Victor Wembanyama. All of the guys that I've listed here are legit ballers and have a spot in the league, so make sure to watch out for them and where they land on draft night, because your team may just luck out and grab one of them. So that's going to do it for this video. Make sure to like, sub, and hopefully I see you in the next one.